studying some cultures very challenging is that due to weather patterns, erosion, wars, all kinds of reasons, sometimes you don't have documents that are intact. Going back to Egypt specifically, it is a very ancient and old culture. It had thousands of years of history. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to study. And
You're taking into something, an angle that is very interesting there, talking of history, talking of representation, talking of narration. And of course, all the work of the artist is about that too. Because as the singer is singing, there are content of what he or she is singing about. There are motivation behind the singing. There are messages deeply buried in it. Hi, I'm Obehi the author of the storytelling series for small businesses and content creators. In Obehi Podcast, we talk about the power of your story, your narrative, and why you should own your voice. Whether you are a small business owner, a content entrepreneur, or you simply want to build your influence, storytelling is probably going to be your best instrument to connect with your audience. So join the awakened few who are owning their voices. Now let's get started with today's episode.
well, I am Melissa Perkins, and I am the founder and owner of You Think Indigo, a global think tank. I hail from the beautiful United States of America by way of North Carolina. That's the state of my origin, middle part of the eastern part of the United States. And I am what I would consider a classical educator, someone who comes from the realm of the education sector. I knew at a very early age I wanted to be a school teacher. And so I studied that and went off to university, became a licensed educator for North Carolina, then eventually Virginia, then on to Hawaii. And so yes, I am someone who's very passionate about learning. And about 5 years ago, I decided to take an entrepreneurial journey and eventually morph that into an ed tech firm, an ed tech company. Then last year, we decided to rebrand the company around my neurodistinction. I am a probability gritter, which means I can crunch probability of human behavior at a high rate of accuracy. And I know that and grew up with that very much a part of who I am. And I've come to know that that is what I term as an indigo, a very highly intuitively gifted individual. And so I decided to really develop my firm to not only support education, but people in the business and entertainment sector as well. And we became a global think tank known as You Think Indigo. And so that is who I am. That is what I do in a nutshell.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. There is a lot actually that is packed into that. But anyway, we're going to be unpacking it one by one. Now, you're going to help us understand a bit about your growing up in the United States. So, say in your years of adolescence, about the years of 8, 9, 10, what to 15 and upward, what do you remember? What do you remember that you want to share with us in terms of what you see around you?
Hmm. Well, I'm very, very fortunate that I grew up with both parents in the home. And what I grew up right out the gate was seeing a couple work as a team. My parents were very present, and my home was a haven for me. I felt very safe growing up. My dad is he would call himself a country boy probably. He met my mother in New York. She was working for telecom, and so he was taking a job in New York City. And that's where he met my mom, and that's where I was born. But he quickly decided he wanted to raise his kids kind of similar to where he was raised, where he had space to play, space to run around and play in nature. And so I grew up in this beautiful suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, the capital of Raleigh, the capital of North Carolina. I grew up in a suburb called Apex, and my dad bought a whole cul-de-sac up, and put a modest home there, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, to raise his 3 children with my mom. And so at 8 years old, one of the biggest things I remember doing is playing. I played outside. I played with honeysuckles and blackberries, and we had a creek, and we had dogs, and I played, and I had an imagination that was allowed to be free. And that is fundamental to who I am as a creative, as an educator, as a global leader. I would say that was the foundation of who I am. And then they lived in a place where we had a very strong school system. So I had excellent teachers. I learned how to read, write, do arithmetic. I grew up in an era and a time when we were moving away from segregation and desegregating. So the area of the country that I lived in attracted a lot of people from different parts of the world because of our university systems. Like I lived near UNC Chapel Hill, NC State, Duke University, so North Carolina Central University, HBCU, that's very famous, and Shaw and St. Aug's. And so it was a very academic driven area. And so our schools reflected that, and they prepared us to go into the world of academia. So school was very important to me, the academic life. And I excelled, I did very well. And I was encouraged a lot, motivated a lot to do well academically. And so I was a high achieving young person that ended up getting a full scholarship to go to university. And because I was so impacted positively by my teachers, I inevitably decided to go in that path. And that was to me the most ideal thing that I wanted to be growing up. I also can say, as a youth, what was very influential, because I'm a kid of the 80s and the 90s, is I was very influenced by pop culture. And at that time, we had MTV coming on the scene, and this whole new thing that my generation, Generation X, helped to cultivate, which was rap music and hip hop. And it was highly conscious, and it made you think, and it talked about issues, and it promoted change. And so that was a big part of my zeitgeist. The spirit of my times was change and disrupting punk rock. So that's kind of my contribution to the world.
Which was your favorite artist at the time? Which one did you enjoy most in it? Okay, now you are a young girl. The party, the dancing, the movie. Okay, we are part of it. There is nothing we can do about that. But tell me, who was the one influencing you the more?
I would say my number one favorite artist of all times is no longer with us, and that was Prince. I'm a major, major Prince fan. Love him with all of my heart. He was just my first crush. I just thought he was beautiful. I loved his voice. Purple Rain, I got like a spanking for playing a particular song on there that wasn't age appropriate. But I took my beating with a smile because I love Prince with all my heart, and I'm a big Michael Jackson fan. Um, I would say, excuse me, in high school, who really impacted me was this rap group called Public Enemy, and I love them. I just felt like they were just speaking the spirit of my times. They were talking about as African Americans how we need to be awake, we need to be more alert, we need to be more in tune with who we are as a people and into our history. And we need to stand up for ourselves and not allow the power structure to oppress us. So they had songs like Fight the Power, went to the Terror Dome, and I would walk around with a Public Enemy jacket on, combat boots, and a beret. I was very proud of who I was. And I grew up in a very racially mixed area. And shockingly, I didn't run into a lot of overt racism, the way some of my peers probably did in other parts of the country, parts of the world. But yet I still had this incredible sense of Afrocentrism and pride in who I was. My mother used to dance with Chuck Davis African Dance Ensemble. And so I grew up hearing African music in the house. And I grew up seeing a portrait of Nefertiti painted in charcoal prominently in my home. So I knew that ancient Egyptians were not looking like Elizabeth Taylor, necessarily, that they were diverse people. They had a lot of the original pharaohs were people who were my complexion and darker. And so I had this sense of awareness growing up, thanks to great parenting and the way that my parents allowed me to cultivate my passion and my love of self and love of culture.
All right, you're taking it to something, an angle that is very interesting there, talking of history, talking of representation, talking of narration. And of course, all the work of the artist is about that too. Because as the singer is singing, there are content of what he or she is singing about. There are motivation behind the singing. There are messages deeply buried in it. Yes, you did make mention of the fact that, okay, now you are beginning to see the image. You could say, well, the ancient pharaoh, or the pharaoh as it were, did it, they didn't look like what we are seeing in the representation today. So what is going on there? I think that is the story that is in it now. That is one of the things that actually we are talking about today, which is storytelling.
Well, I would say it was a medallion around my mother's neck. My mother wore a Nefertiti medallion around her neck, and I did not see a lot of that talked about in my history books. And so I just had an awareness as a youth that a lot of my books did not have a lot of information about my heritage and where I came from. So when I was in high school, I went on a quest to really learn more. And I remember reading a book by um, Lerone Bennett Jr., if I'm not mistaken. I think it was called Before the Mayflower, John Hope Franklin. I started reading books about African American history to supplement the things that I was not getting in school. My teachers were Caucasian American, white American, and so but they were good. They were very good. And I had a history teacher named Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper really encouraged us to think outside of a box and to, if we didn't see something that we were looking for, to go and find it ourselves. And so I did. I appreciate having educators who encouraged me to go beyond what was presented and to be a researcher. And that stayed with me. And it made me want to be an educator. It made me want to be that kind of educator. And so when I ultimately became a history teacher myself, and started teaching social studies, I would really teach a lot from the primary sources. I wanted my scholars to get the source, go to the source, and to go beyond a textbook. And I don't tear down conventional education and textbooks. I just encourage people to go beyond them. I think that they're a starting tool, but they're written with an agenda. They're written presumptive, in my opinion. And the story that people want you to know of them. It's a story that that particular government wants you to know of them. That society thinks that you think is important. But then I feel like the learner, myself, I have a responsibility to tap into the innate intelligence that's within me and explore beyond that. And that's what I was taught to do, and that's what I encourage people to do.
Now, take up a one step further into that. So, what is your main area of concentration in history? That is going to be very important for me now and for the people of African diaspora.
Well, to be honest with you, I know what I studied in university. My major was general history. That's what I majored in. That's what I concentrated in. So the word general, what does that mean? I am, I would have to say, I am a self-motivated, self-driven historian. I'm curious about humanity. So I gave myself my own curriculum. a very young, a very young person. So there's what I majored in at university. I went to Meredith College. That's what I majored in and became a historian there. And so I did their modus operandi. But to be honest with you, I am someone who I've always been very fascinated studying the ancient cultures of Africa, the kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhay. I love to look at ancient Egyptian history. I always marveled at how people in the Western culture, particularly Eurocentric culture, tried to take Egypt out of Africa, as if it's not there and it's an African nation. It's not Middle Eastern, it's in the continent of Africa. And so I love studying, antiquity and looking at cultures. And the way I work with history, the way I work with the quote unquote past is not getting obsessive compulsive about dates and the way that the Western culture tried to tell me that that's how you learn history by memorizing a timeline. I would look at the phenomenons of people. I would look at patterns of behavior. I was drawn to the values of a society, their prioritization, how they went about economics, how they went about their religion, their socialization, their family structures. You could probably say I was more into the anthropological approach, the culture, the way societies were made up, the sociology of an area. For me, having the influence of Africa, the continent of Africa, the Ubuntu spirit coming through my DNA and coming through my family. For me, history wasn't about military procedure. History wasn't about foreign policy and governments only. History was about people and how they treated each other, how they loved each other. And it wasn't for me about staying frozen in the past, but it was more about how do I apply it to today? How can I look at what I am deciding now and the peers around me are deciding now? And how can we improve upon what happened previously? Or how can we reinvent something new? Because history happens the minute you take a breath. There's immediate history and then there's antiquity, right? And so we're always, to me, always living in the present moment. We're always now. And so when you're reflective, which is kind of what I think history is about, is reflecting on your behaviors, learning from the things you've done before. That is my approach to history. So my answer to you succinctly is my way of studying history is very organic.
Very organic. I love that. All right. Melissa, let's look at a demography, the African diaspora. Uh, why do you think it is important for us to learn about history as a group of people?
Well, I think that it's so interesting. Our people, and I'm talking very generically and very collectively, we have always valued our history. We just don't call it or talk about it the way Herodotus did, and the ancient Greeks and the Europeans. They were called stories, oral tradition. That is history. We have always had that as a part of who we are. I was told stories about my family. I was told stories of my mom about her growing up. That is history. The stories we tell, the stories, the things we pass down, the getting together at family functions and laughing about the stuff that you did in your childhood and talking about where your dad worked and your grandma worked and the community. And that is history. We're always talking about it as a people. And I think it's so important that we recognize that and that we keep doing it and that we keep modeling it and way showing it to each other and to our young people and not get so caught up in doing things the way Eurocentric education systems have imposed upon us. And in saying that, I'm not saying there isn't a value in classical Eurocentric type of style of education. There's value in all types of learning, I personally believe. But I also think it's so imperative that we celebrate the natural things that are embedded in our communities and in our cultures that we do, and that we don't keep looking away from it thinking something's better and we're off and we shouldn't be doing this or we should be doing something more when we don't even stop and look at what we do so well. We do so many things well as a people, as a culture, as a diaspora, whether it's in the African American culture, whether it's in the Igbo culture of Nigeria, whether you're Yoruba in Nigeria, whether you are in other cultures within the continent, other countries in the continent. Look at what you're doing already and celebrate it and that's what I would like to see us do more, is not look at what we're failing at and what we're not doing enough of. So often when I'm around people from the diaspora and we talk about education, we immediately start to tear down and lament on what is going wrong. And one of the things that I think is so important is that we elevate what we do well naturally. And I think what we do good is tell stories, and that is us. We are the story, and the story is the history.
Wow, Melissa, you see, you are a bomb. You are really super. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I really love that. In this podcast, a number of times I've tried to break the word history into two. But of course, I've never really asked a historian to help me uh, take it down to really explain the concept very well. Because I'm not really like, I am not officially a historian. I just like to talk about story. And now you just said something that I like a lot, which is that when we are talking of history, we're actually talking of story. Because now history have two words there, his and story. Because if we take away story, history doesn't even exist at all. It is because in history we are talking of story, and story is nothing more than the experiences of people. So as a historian, I want you to help me look at those two words, his and story. Anything we can learn from that, because I think you really drive the point home that we have been talking about history forever. And maybe we just are not using the term that I use by other academia, but that doesn't mean we are not talking story or history. Help me understand the his and story. Please go on.
You know, one of the things that I like to do is, again, celebrate different cultures that are not my own. And it seems in the European type of system, they really admired the work of the ancient Greeks. We're very influenced by the Roman culture and society. That's the ancient societies that are considered classical in Europe mainly because of the Roman Empire's influence on Europe. And the thing that I have to say is I admire the discipline, the idea of making something a discipline, which means you make it a focus. You really try to get something from it that is useful. And I think that when I look at history, I think that that is the intention behind it, is to look at behaviors and patterns and decisions, particularly around leadership, so that it can inform how you are as a citizen. It can inform how you are as a leader. So, in that way, I think there's wisdom that I can use here as a member of the diaspora, of the African diaspora. I can utilize that, but that is not a European invention. Um, the continent of Africa has had some of the greatest leaders ever known to humanity. So, leadership, royalty, sovereignty, um, reverence for God, all of these things are not a European invention. It is a human invention. And all throughout, wherever humanity is, they have developed and cultivated leadership. Bottom line, leadership. And so when you think of history, what I would like to introduce to everyone to do is to maybe shift it in your mind as a story of leadership. What is the story of humanity leading? And this idea of um, not that I think that was the intention of the word, or history itself was to promote masculinity, but what we find with this thing about power is often something that is hoarded or kept by a certain group, be them a certain class of citizen, gender, culture, ethnicity, physical appearance grouping, whatever it is. And so power is an interesting thing. It's an interesting curriculum that we work on as humans. But what I would invite people to ask themselves is, what is the advantage, or what is the wisdom of excluding the stories of others? What is the advantage? How does that really help us to exclude other people's stories? And women are leaders in our societies. Anytime, to me, the creator has entrusted a particular segment of our population to birth human life, you may want to talk to that segment of people, okay? Because they may know a little something, something. And I also feel, that our elders, people who have lived a long time, who have been on this earth for a while, they have wisdom. We should go to our elders. And I also think youth have a fresh perspective. They see the world very nuanced and they come in here with an energy. And so, our youth, what are their stories? It doesn't help us to exclude the stories of people who, just because we're the majority of the culture, now you have this segment of people, they're the minority, there's not a lot of them. What's their story? What do they have to contribute?
Before we were explaining, you didn't really mention of the fact that Western scholar or Western media are taking away or try to take away Egypt from Africa. I don't know if you want to expand on that a bit. That might be very interesting for people to know.
Well, I just think it's interesting how humans try to justify certain things that they can't explain and rewrite or approach, I shouldn't say reapproach, approach learning in a different way. I just find it fascinating. And I find that it's fascinating that a lot of people who are Eurocentric or European in background, how they just don't logically put Egypt and Africa, the pyramids, they don't know how to make them. And so they admire certain aspects of a culture, and then they just kind of just determine, I guess this isn't African because they live in huts, so they just kind of sometimes people can just be very oversimplistic in their understanding just because of ignorance. They just haven't been exposed. They haven't had a lot of exposure. When you think of kings and royalty, Europeans are very quick to make that about animals. The Lion King. It's very difficult for Disney to really show African people as kings and queens. They'll do it for animals, but they won't really do it for people. And it's just because of conditioning. It's just because of how people have been exposed and how they've been raised. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important that members of the diaspora, the African diaspora, that we become knowledgeable of our own heritage, that we know ourselves, that we, above all, take the time to learn who we are and encourage our children to learn who we are. And going back to Egypt specifically, it is a very ancient and old culture. It had thousands of years of history. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to study. And what makes studying some cultures very challenging is that due to weather patterns, erosion, wars, all kinds of reasons, sometimes you don't have documents that are intact. And so you're left with archaeological findings. You're left with remnants and certain things, and a lot is left to your imagination unless you're able to find ancient scripts of other people who were able to write down some accounts. But all of that is through their lens, right? All of that is coming through the filter of someone else's perception. And so a lot of what we have to do, I think, as human beings, is ask ourselves, what is the motivation for learning something? Like, why are we fascinated with something? Like, what is our agenda? What is our motivation? What do we hope to get from it? And a lot of times when we're left with a lot of ancient cultures and the remnants, the artifacts, some of their shrines and different things, we're learning or seeing them out of context. We're not seeing them in the spirit of their times. You heard me use the word zeitgeist earlier. It's a German term that means spirit of the time. And so we don't always see things as they really actually probably were. It's based on our guessing, our educated hypothesis, so to say. and that's okay. The real thing when it comes down to Egypt is that Egyptians are living today. They're not in the past. There's modern day Egypt. The Egyptian people are here now. And most people don't know a whole lot about modern day Egypt. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand. This is a very old culture, as old as China, and they've gone through lots of different peoples coming in and out and influencing who they are. And it's a very rich history, but it is in Africa. And Africa is dynamic. The continent of Africa has about 54 countries on it. And I say countries loosely because some of that was imposed by colonial rule and borders and this, that, and the other. But the people of that beautiful part of the world, they know who they are, many of them. They know what their original names were called before European interference came in. And so I think that they have rich histories and rich existences that need to be told, and stories need to be told from their perspective. And growing up here in the West, with the resources that we had, is one of the reasons why I believe in travel abroad. I believe the best way to learn about Egypt is to go to Egypt. The best way to learn about Ghana is to go to Ghana, to go to Nigeria, and sometimes we're not always able to physically go someplace. So then the next best thing is to build relationships with people who are there, build friendships, join communities virtually if you can't get there physically, and ask questions. Ask for the local people to help you to understand what's going on there today. Why is it relevant to you? And where did it come from? And this beautiful curiosity and excitement that we have as humans, and the technology today we have, we're able to, like we're doing right now, we're able to get together online, meet each other, and talk and exchange knowledge. This is the exciting opportunity that we have right now. And let's take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is why we're here. And this is why we really must continue to encourage it. All right. I do have my curiosity, Melissa. Now, when historians talk about history, maybe when we take a piece of history, say the antiquity, for example, because I think this is where a lot of African history get put on the ditch, as if it's not there, whether it is there. The other day, I was interviewing an Egyptologist. Then I was asking her name is Vanessa Davis, I think that's her name, yeah. So I was asking her, now, the United States is doing an expedition to Egypt to study the Egyptian history. Is that a neutral event, or do you have a kind of a lens through which you are going to filter the evidence that you see? In that when you get to Egypt, you already know what you want to know. So when you get there, you are looking for that evidence to support what you want to know. Meaning, if you find something different, it's not going to be relevant.
Yeah.
This might actually be very natural in that somebody is footing the bee. That person need to be satisfied at the end of the day. Because I believe history is not just like, how do I say it? It's a point of view. I look at it like when we talk of religion, for example, no, okay, maybe I'm just putting too many things into it now. That for you to know God, you must know God through Jesus Christ, through Christianity, therefore through Bible. Anything other than this, it means you don't know God. Okay, it depends on who you are. At a point, I used to think that might be right, but I've grown to understand that that cannot be right. That is dictatorship. Because God was supposed to be universal. The kind of figurative design that we have when we say something is universal or global is a circumference. A circumference or a circle, usually 360 degrees. If therefore we were to apportion a degree to Christianity, it would be a very small like this, which means you can see God through Christianity, but this is very small like this from 360 degree angle, which means You can't say because you are known within the line of the Bible, you don't know God. It doesn't make sense. All right. Talking of history, I think people, when they go to study history, they already have a kind of a predefined thing of what they are looking for. Because history is tied to politics, it's tied to the military, it's tied to the economy. So this is my curiosity. I'm just like having. So that when you say in Africa, for example, there is no history, is it really true that in Africa there is no history? Because if history is about the experiences of the people, and in Africa, people have been living for several thousands of years before they move from Africa to Europe, another part of the world, how could we possibly say that these people didn't have any experience? What does it mean? I'm not able to understand that. Can you help me?
To me, there is no way in the world, Africa, that continent, being that it helps to gird up and promote humanity and existence and has from the beginning of time, it doesn't have history. It doesn't, it's every region of this earth is screaming its history, is screaming its story. If you will listen, even the birds, even the trees, even the landscape is telling you a story. If you'll listen. Um, the thing about the expedition you're speaking of, I know nothing of it, so I can't speak to it. But what I would say is whenever people get together to do something, especially something that's going to have funding to it or whatever, they typically plan it out. They typically have an agenda. They typically have an intention. And if it's academically sponsored, often there's some kind of a thesis that you're trying to prove. There is something that you have assumed and you're looking for evidence. So a lot of Western society and culture, they do what I call an evidence-based model of learning. They're always looking for evidence. It goes back to the we have very much embedded in our academic system the scientific method, and so it's about proof and analysis and evidence. That's one approach. That's an approach. But they can learn other ways. There's other ways to learn. You don't have to learn with the scientific method. What were we doing for thousands of years before the scientific method? Learning, growing, right? And so we have to just understand that there are different ways that people prefer to learn, and they don't have to be ours. When I wrote a book of philosophy, a guide to conscious learning called the Indigo Approach a year ago. We're celebrating the 1 year anniversary right now. And when I wrote this work, it has 7 principles in it. And these principles are always pointing the learner back to self, back to our innate soul intelligence. I believe intelligence is not based in the mind, but in the soul. And the mind is an amazing tool that we have been given. And we all have different tools, right? And yet we try to promote in so many schools and so many communities and cultures around the world one way of learning where we have all this diversity. And that's not to say that there isn't something to be said for standardization and practical approaches to, modeling or delivering knowledge. I would just offer that we need to make room for the fact that we have different ways of processing information. We can look at the same situation happen, and you will walk away with a different perception than me. Right there is the story of history. Okay, right there. I see it one way, you see it this way. Who's right? Who's wrong? It's my perception. It's how I interpret it. And to go back to what you were talking about in terms of religion and belief systems, I think for me, I choose to believe that there is a God. I think God is genius. I think God is genius because um, we can believe in God or not. That's the genius of God, is it gave to me the creation, the free will to accept it or not to accept it. See, I don't know if we could do that easily. I don't know if we were the almighty creators of something, we would allow what we create to reject us and to not accept us and to question us and to dissect us and to make us 5,500 things or one thing. I don't know if we would have it in us to give what we created that kind of freedom, that kind of sovereignty. So that's why I have such an appreciation for my creator, because it gave me the freedom to question. And that's why no human being can stop me from questioning anything or having my own thoughts or my own perceptions or my own way of doing things. You cannot contain me as soul. You can't control me. You have no power over me because my creator has made me sovereignty. And that includes my intelligence. Yeah.
Oh, that is very powerful. It's very interesting. Anyway, of the question of religion, we really do give it enough consideration here. But let's see if we can sort of concentrate on history just now, because I really would like to explore that too. I find it very interesting. I find it very interesting in and of itself too. All right, you did create this principle in your book where you talked of the principle where that is pointing the learner toward itself. That is very interesting for me. I love that. Can you please expand on that? Help the viewers, those that are listening to you, help them to understand what you mean.
What I mean, beloved soul, is I want you to remember. I want you to remember who you are. You are, to me, a spark of the divine. And that's not a religious thing. For me, I just want to remind people that if you are a spark of something, according to my thesis, if I think that you're a spark of something divine and highly intelligent, what does that make you? Intelligent by default. By default. You're so intelligent, Obehi, in my opinion, it's automated, your intelligence. I'll prove it to you. Do you sit down and concentrate and take a breath, or do you just do it automated? What about digesting your food? Do you like make your broccoli go through your belly? It's automated, yes? So you are automatically intelligent. From the time you're a baby, you know and have inside of you a built-in program of growth and knowledge acquisition. That is genius, pure genius. And so what is interesting to me is that we then allow other people to call us dumb and stupid and ignorant and ridiculous and foolish and special education and learning disabled and handicapped and all these different things. We allow those labels and things to come upon us when we are innately genius. Innately, from birth. It cannot be separated from us. The thing that I would submit is that sometimes we want to learn how to do something, and there are people around us who know how to do it, in our opinions, better than us. And so we want to learn from them. Those are our educators, right? So we go and we learn from our community educators, the mechanic down the street who can make and build engines very well for cars, or that amazing chef down the street who knows how to make the best cakes in the world, that pastry chef who makes the best cakes in the world. You're going to learn from these people. So you become an apprentice of theirs. That's wonderful. That's great. But if you don't do it their way, if you decide to innovate and do it in another way and improve upon it, what does that make you now? Okay. So if you do things differently from other people, that's your freedom to do. And it doesn't take away from their knowledge and their abilities. It doesn't make you better than them that you can do it differently or that you see it differently. And if they are the standard that everybody else around you has determined is the best cake maker, the best candlestick maker, the best this, that, and the other, and you don't do it their way, well, you will probably be evaluated as falling short, will you not? That's how it is right now. But I just submit to the learner, you still can choose how you learn. You can choose who you learn from. Not everybody do I want to learn from. Now that I'm an adult and I can pick and create my learning environment and scenarios, I'm very selective about who gets to speak into my life and who I want to learn from. I have the choice to pick where I want to go. And the reason why the indigo approach is something that I have put forth to humanity, I have a goal to have this work reach 1.4 billion people by 2025. It's a lot of people in a short period of time. But there's 1.2 billion people on the continent of Africa. That's why I'm coming. That's why I'm focused on Africa. There's 1.2 billion people there. There are more youth per capita in that part of the world than anywhere else. And I'm here to get a message to them. And that is that they are supreme, sublime, highly intelligent, and ready to go. And you don't have to go to other parts of the world to be prosperous. You can learn how to be prosperous right there where you are. The world should be coming to Africa and has been coming to Africa to take things away. But it's important to me that the youth of Africa raise up and keep Africa in your hearts and keep the prosperity and the wealth there on the continent. And let the rest of the world see if they can come and hang, see if they can come and learn from you at your feet. Yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you for that. All right. You see, the conversation of today actually have two topics that are put together. One is history. The other one is education. Now let's spend some time on education. And okay, I don't just want to call it education. I want to call it learning. How do we learn? Help us understand that.
I love that question. How do we learn? I'm gonna give you two words that I think will help. It helped me. Absolute patience. I got this term from a gentleman by the name of Harold Klemp. He writes a lot of books that I like. And so I was reading in one of his books and he said the phrase, absolute patience. And it just stayed with me. And I call it golden wisdom. Golden wisdom. How do I learn? I have decided to be patient with myself and allow things to unfold. I am on my own pace, my own calendar, my own clock. I'm not on Obehi's clock. I'm not on my colleague's clock or a client's clock. But that doesn't mean time shouldn't be respected. But I am learning at my own pace, according to how I process things neurologically. And so I'm giving myself time. And that's not easy, to be honest with you, because by nature, I'm a very impatient person. So this is a discipline I have to work at, Obehi. I wish I could say to you, I'm so patient, I'm so calm. I'm not. but but I'm learning this. The other thing that I would submit in terms of learning is to know where you stop and another person begins. It's another principle in the indigo approach. And that means that I have my way of learning, but it may not be your way of learning. So I can show you my way. I can be a way shower, but I don't want to push the way that I learn onto you. I don't think learners do well when people push ideology on them and push things on them, try to force things on them that they're not ready to process, or even that they don't even want to do. Because we have interests. We have interests. And I think the best learning that happens is interest-based learning, where we're learning things that interest us. We're naturally more self-motivated. We retain things more because we want to know it. And we share. And that is when it gets really exciting for learners, is when they are so excited about learning something, they can't wait to tell you. They're like, oh my God, I just learned how to do this thing. I just figured, and that's, ooh, and we get so excited. And nobody has to force you, and you're not falling asleep at the desk, you know? And so learning that is interest-based is so wonderful. And we do it naturally. We are natural learners. So I like to help people a lot when it comes to education. Stop trying to make it complicated and recognize you do it all the time. It's when you're getting on your phone and you're hitting TikTok to see that latest video to learn how to do this do-it-yourself thing, this DIY thing. You're learning how to fix your car or do something. Nobody forces you to do that. You're motivated. You want to learn how to do that. And that is what's exciting about learning is that you do it already. No one needs to really teach you how to learn. They just need to get out of your way and quit interfering with you so that you can learn more regularly and happily and form a community and do it more often. You understand? That's what I've come to know about learning. That's so exciting. And I'm here to demystify it. And I formed a whole think tank to help people demystify learning in the education sector, demystify learning in the business sector, and in the entertainment industry. And I love it. It makes me happy.
Thank you so much for that. I really love that. Thank you. You think Indigo. Now, tell us about that. Tell us about that project. I think people should learn about it.
Well, first of all, it is your global think tank. It is the global think tank, as my colleague Abdul says. And it's for you. We have a community that is global. And we have a virtual thinkers garden that you're invited to come to, and it's complimentary. Just to come in there and really bond and share your thoughts and hang out with great griots and great scholars and have great discussions like we're having right here with Obehi. It's like what we do all the time. We love this. That's why I couldn't wait to get and have a chance to talk with you, because this is very natural to what we do in our community. The next thing is that once you come into the Thinker's Garden, I encourage you to find a sector that really speaks to you, whether it be the education sector, whether it be the business sector, or the entertainment sector. Find your tribe. And then we have some tools that we're unveiling to people. We have a soul intelligence analysis you can take, or a soul intelligence activation that you can be a part of, or in our creative community with our entertainers, you can do a creative impact analysis to really help you know some things about the entertainment industry and how you fit into it and how you can grow a project or what have you. So we like to do things to really help our community become more self-aware of their innate intelligence. And then from there, we have other services that you can be able to procure to help you work on projects so that we can bring in some solutions with you. We don't tell people what to do. We help people tap into their resources, their knowledge, in their community to help solve some wonderful things that they're working on, whether it be projects, a career plan, pathway that you're trying to cultivate. We're here to help support. And so we highly recommend bringing our think tank in. And one of the most exciting things that we're doing is in partnership with Vision Afrique Development, which is the next iteration of the African Union, is we are focusing on building smart cities in this area, because we think that people in respective countries in Africa are highly intelligent beings, and that they can build incredible societies that set the trend for the rest of the world, and how to build prosperity and how to do and build eco-friendly environments that respect the land, but more importantly, respect the people. And so we can't wait to do this with Vision Afrique Development.
Thank you so much for that. I wish you a lot of success in so all the beautiful things that you are doing. Because, of course, we talked about history before. We talked about storytelling, which is part of it in a big way, because it is important that we own our voice. We are sort of very fanatic of that here, that we need to own our voice. We need to tell our story. Because it's a point of view. Where you are today, what is your experience? What is the experience of other people that look like you? If we are talking of the African diaspora, for example, you see people that have been here for like 30, 40, 50 years. There is a strong and a powerful story behind them. Somebody need to tell that story. And that person should better be us, because that is our story. All right. Now, how can people connect with you? This is important. People have listened to your delivery now. They are passionate. They are empowered. They are inspired. They want to connect with you. How can they reach you?
Absolutely. Well, first, please, by all means, feel free to call me. I love talking to people. So my number is 984-200-0069. It is on our website, which is www dot u, the lowercase u, thinkindigo.com. And also you can email me at info@youthinkindigo.com. And so you can reach me, call me. And I'm very active on social media, particularly an app called Clubhouse. So if you go and put in You Think Indigo or Melissa Perkins, you'll find me. Follow me. I'm there every single week with my team, having amazing conversations that are live and interactive. And so I love to engage with our community. So by all means, come and hang out with us on Clubhouse.
Thank you so much for that. Now, what will be your final thought today based on what we have discussed, whether relating to storytelling, relating to African diaspora, or relating to your important project that you are working on? Yes, go ahead and conclude this conversation.
Sure. I would just like to just express my gratitude to Obehi for inviting me to be here. I found this experience so pleasant and so enlightening, and I thought your questions were just phenomenal. And my final thoughts for everyone is to know how incredibly gifted and fantastic that you are. Like to know it. Know it. Don't question it. Know it. Know how intelligent you are. And treat yourself kindly around it. And you are the story. You're the story. You're the history maker. Every time you take a breath and you make the world a better place than it was the breath before, you're a history maker. So keep doing that. Keep making every act you do something that makes this planet a better place to live and the people around you better people by being kind, showing them love, and building up what they're doing and allowing them to build up what you're doing. This is an amazing golden era that we live in. And I just encourage us to all to seize that moment, to make the most of it. And may your light shine on.
Thank you so much for that. That is really powerful. I love that is a blessing that you are extending to the people. I think it is well received. May your life shine up too. That is beautiful.
That is our saying at You Think Indigo. We say that all the time. May your light shine.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the sharing, the education, the outpouring of your heart so that people can feel something. And I believe that the people have felt something. So, of course, they will reach out to you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you never miss any of our future episodes. Rate and review Obehi Podcast and share with your friends who might need it. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you in the next episode.